What's a conspiracy theory that later got proven to be true? Jimmy Savile being a pedophile. John Lydon from Sex Pistols even came forward in the 90s and spoke about it on radio 20 years before the public found out. Edit. For those who don't know, he was an insanely popular UK TV and radio presenter and DJ, apparently the first ever to use twin turntables. He was a household name here, according to his wiki page. 450 people whose ages range from 8 to 47 came forward to complain about him. Investigations within 28 NHS hospitals confirmed that he sexually assaulted patients aged 5 to 75. Everybody knew. Nobody could stop it. Many even encouraged it and covered up for him. Update. See this post by You Vic the Maddest Wife for a better idea of how popular this guy was. The FBI really was eavesdropping on Dr. King. Government surveillance is the most obvious one. Apple slows down older iPhones with software updates. Project MK Ultra. The CIA really was experimenting on unsuspecting citizens to determine the effects of LSD, specifically as relates to mind control. Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking women and children for some very elite people on a temple island. Crazy but true. The Epstein case really opened the door to conspiracies for me. I lost all trust in our government. Like this man had dirt on tons of higher level politicians and celebrities and magically kills himself before he has to testify, and nobody seems to be aggressively getting to the bottom of it. He was running child sex rings with world leaders. What the actual duck? Why are we not up in arms over this? What's also shocking to me is how little the media covered it and how it's pretty much already blown over. What else has the government covered up? The Bruce MacArthur story is a weird one. For 7 years there was a conspiracy theory of a serial killer specifically targeting gay men around Toronto was floating around, but it could never be proven, until eventually enough evidence came up implicating him and he got caught in a sting operation. That we've had a female president before. There was a theory that Roosevelt was ill and bedridden for the latter part of his second term in office and that his wife was secretly running the show, making most of the decisions. Turns out it was true. Many people who were part of Roosevelt's staff at the time admitted it years later. A rival of Thomas Jefferson revealed to the press that Jefferson had had an affair and several children with an enslaved person he owned, Sally Hemings, who was actually his late wife's half-sister. It was adamantly denied by the Jefferson family and historic foundations until recent DNA testing revealed it had been true. Edit. Just for further context, their arrangement was made while both Sally and Thomas were in France, where he was serving as American ambassador. At the time Jefferson was age 44-46 while Hemings was age 14-16, and while Sally was a free woman while in France there was certainly personal power dynamics at play. Sally being only 1/8 African herself and by many accounts was passable. Who could have chosen to stay in France, which was in poverty at the time on the edge of the French Revolution, made the decision to return to slavery in America under the stipulation that any children she would have would be freed at age 21. Sally also had a brother, James, who Jefferson brought to France to be trained in French cuisine, who also agreed to return to enslavement. To give context, whether there was affection and legitimate romance is unclear, as their relationship was never legitimized in Jefferson's writings or otherwise. The writings left from Sally's children say he never showed them any affection, though the Hemings were said to have received preferential treatment even before the arrangement. All 5 of Sally's surviving children were freed under the agreement, and when Jefferson died, Sally was given her time, no longer given forced tasks but never freed. When Sally died she was buried in an unmarked enslaved person's grave. Probably the most recent one that we didn't have enough time to label as a conspiracy theory was a couple of months ago, when AI firms started picking up anomalous spikes in pneumonia related deaths and started talking about the fact that there is another, unknown pandemic going on that's killing people but mislabeled as pneumonia. Edit. Here is an article about how a Canadian startup spotted it 9 days before WHO announced the pandemic. My comment about is mainly conjecture, but I think it is very plausible that Blue Dot is not the only startup research group picked up on the fact that something is going on. Most of us, including myself, have anecdotes regarding themselves or relatives going through horrible illnesses late 19. There is meaningful trends in retrospect, so there must be trends back then that must have triggered something. Any statistical engine analyzing the data, if any. Edit 2. Theodulf also shared some more sources on the subject. Edit 3. Here is another link from Casper. A lot of Bernie Madoff's investors knew his fund was a scam. He had plenty of hedge fund quants and other sophisticated clients who understood there's no honest way to consistently outperform the market. They knew that a fund taking aggressive risks might beat the market most years, but it'll be up and down, some years way up, a few years flat. Nobody just churns out 11% can guarantee above market gains year after year. Not honestly, anyway. But they were wrong with what kind of scam Madoff was running. They assumed he was hooked up with an insider trading scheme, i.e. somebody inside Apple GMG and was leaking quarterly earnings figures to him a week before they were publicly announced, letting him load up or dump stock before the market reacted, instead of blowing the whistle. These guys all bought into the scam. Of course, as it turns out, Madoff was just running a traditional Ponzi scheme. Use new investors' deposits to pay out all the withdrawals, then steal whatever's left over. And if you're claiming 11% returns, deposits are going to vastly outnumber withdrawals. I feel bad for his true victims, but a lot of the investors he ripped off could better be described as co-conspirators. Edit. Misremembered some details. Madoff was guaranteeing up to 20% returns, not just outperforming the market, but promising he would. That's considerably different than the high-risk IPO fund that our Wall Street but seems to love. Rosemary Kennedy was shut away from society because of a botched lobotomy. Her family didn't know about it for 20 years. When I listened to the Slate podcast Slow Burn about Watergate, they mentioned how to a lot people. It seemed to be the first vindicated conspiracy theory since it was first reported by tabloids and whatnot. That the government was monitoring our phones. It may seem unthinkable now, but just a few decades ago the idea that the Catholic Church was knowingly harboring pedophiles among its ranks and would move those child molesters to different locations with fresh victims when the people at their current location became suspicious was thought to be a conspiracy theory only believed by total tinfoil hat nutcases. Shame it turned out to be horribly true. And the Catholic Church still hasn't cleaned up their act. If the choir boys are in less danger now, it's not because the church has cracked down on the predators. It's because normal people now know not to leave their kid alone with Father McPhilly. 30 years ago my aunt and uncle, educated scientists, told me that Harvard and the other Ivy Leagues had a secret quota they used to keep Asians limited. I stupidly thought this was crazy because I was repeatedly told affirmative action can only help you, not hurt you. And here we are. That China harvests organs from their prisoners. The first rumors came out in the early 2000s, but everyone dismissed it since it came from Falun Gong practitioners, which were like a Chinese Buddhist cult. If you lived in any major city, you'd see them passing out flyers and protesting in front of Chinese embassies and no one believed them. 20 years later, we all know it to be true. The Lincoln assassination. That was a true conspiracy, with shadowy meetings and plans and everything. Besides Lincoln, they planned to kill the VP Johnson and Secretary of State Seward. Unlike movie conspirators, most of these guys were dolts. The VP assassin chickened out. Seward's would-be assassin succeeded in seriously wounding him but failed to kill him. JWB succeeded but was caught and killed a couple weeks later. They were all rounded up, and in the heat of the times were executed. Even Mary Surratt, who owned the boarding house where they met, was hanged. The doctor who set Booth's leg, broken during the escape, got 20 years in prison. People don't think of it as a classic conspiracy, because there wasn't a government or state-sponsored hand behind it. Try as they might, the feds could never find any proof that the Confederate leadership had anything to do with it, but it was a conspiracy nonetheless. Edit. Apparently this wasn't fully proven. If someone would like to share more about this story, feel free. That the FBI spied on Ernest Hemingway. That the FBI was heavily involved in drug distribution to lower income predominantly black neighborhoods a few decades back. Edit. CIA, not FBI. No one gonna bring up Operation Sea Spray? The Navy was testing bacterial weaponry in 1950 on San Francisco. They released pathogens off the shore and calculated that there was enough for the whole population to get a dose. Caused a spike in urinary tract infections and a guy died. That government agents keep asking this on Reddit to see if there are any new leaks. CIA was responsible for the death of nuclear physicist Homi Bhabha, who wanted to extract India's thorium reserves to create the nation's 3-stage nuclear power program. A journalist who taped interviews with a former CIA operative, Robert Crowley Talks, later made this public. That Michael Jackson's father had him chemically castrated. His doctor confirmed it after his death. People missing the proven to be true part of the question. Remember when crazies thought the CIA was listening to stuff said in your home? Now, we're all like, hey, CIA, do you know a good chicken recipe? There was an old conspiracy theory that during Prohibition the government was poisoning alcohol to prevent people from drinking, and even up the strength of the poison. Apparently 10,000 people died. Making Nazis American citizens and erasing their pasts. There was a conspiracy that used to go around that a bunch of politicians, business owners, and actors spent 2 weeks in the California woods having orgies and sacrificing children. It was sometime between 1999 and 2001, but Alex Jones, who at the time was new to the reporting world, contacted the BBC and told them he wanted to prove that conspiracy. They sent him a BBC reporter and a camera, and they snuck into the supposed camp and captured footage of actors and politicians camping out together and burning child effigies in front of a giant owl statue. After 9/11 though, the shock factor quickly got tossed to the wind. But it was still proved. Still happens. And there's still footage of the cremation of care ceremony at Bohemian Grove. The 2017 Jacksonville Jaguars were frauds. One that got proven false was the Rosenbergs were falsely accused, which was a subject of many documentaries in the 70s and 80s. After the fall of USSR, it was proven they were spies. E.T. Atari game being buried in the desert after being a total failure. China having more than 3,336 deaths from COVID-19. How has the leaded gas conspiracy not been mentioned? The US government and powerful lobbies deny leaded gasoline was affecting society for decades. Drops in violent crime exactly follow the reduction in the use of leaded gasoline across multiple countries. A. Kehoe. Gulf of Tonkin incident. Gleiwitz incident. This one is in the works right now. Here is what the government is currently doing to enrich themselves while stealing about 1 trillion inches tax money from us and funneling it through new private companies. Blue Flame Medical. In LA and all over the country, FEMA is going to hospitals and seizing medical supplies. Like a full-on government raid to take the supplies back. Source. More than FEMA representative said the agency, working with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Defense, has developed a system for identifying needed supplies from vendors and distributing them equitably. This will have zero transparency, guaranteed. They're just funneling it through Kushner's 3-week-old shell company for massive profiteering. The Trump administration and the GOP would have us get sick and die while they profit off of tax dollars. Here is how it works with sources for each step. I wish I was crazy and this was a harebrained conspiracy. It looks like it's real. 1. Eliminate oversight of the spending of nearly $1 trillion of tax dollars. 2. Acquire the authority to command which businesses get which contracts. 3. Have trusted people stand up companies through which the money can be funneled. 3-week-old company, founded through a loan approved via the coronavirus stimulus bill, is now the center of medical supply distribution. I don't want to overstate, but we probably represent the largest global supply chain for COVID-19 supplies right now, he said. We are getting ready to fill 100 million unit mask orders. 4. Have the federal government sell, at a reduced price, its strategic stockpile to the new companies, run by your buddies. 5. Have the states bid on the supplies, driving up the price. 6. Have the federal government spend taxpayer dollars to ship supplies purchased from China to these brand new private companies, UTM source equals Twitter commandamp. UTM medium equals socialandamp. UTM term equals NPRA news. 7. Eliminate the competition. Attack any company that doesn't play ball. The CIA spreading crack through black communities. Mass surveillance by the US government used to be a crackpot theory until Snowden revealed it was actually true and the NSA were doing just that. Concentration camps. There were several reports to allied governments about them. No one believed it until the US Army started liberating them. At least the scale of it. Every single email being recorded by the US government, or rather the government spying on the entire nation without us ever really knowing it. Someone told me that it when I was a teenager and I mocked them for such a foolish thought. And I was a geek. I knew how computers and networks and all that jazz worked. I just never thought the US would create goddamn data farms and sit there capturing every email sent. They have drives upon drives upon drives of data. So much that there is nowhere near enough staff to go through them all. And it took a hero named Edward Snowden to tell us the truth. And how does my country repay doing the right thing? They outcast him and call him a criminal, when they were the criminals to begin with. So ducking arrogant of me to think my government couldn't be that corrupt. And so disgusting that a good, honest man is chased from the country he loved. Duck you. US Gov't, IDC if you're a Dem, Pub, Centralist, whatever. You're all a bunch of corrupt little its. And Snowden, in the highly unlikely event you're reading this, thank you. Thank you so much. That girl from Smallville being involved in a sex cult. MK Ultra, CIA mind control and behavior modification program. There were a lot of different conspiracies about it and it turned out to be true. Some notorious people were subjects in the program, including the Unabomber and Whitey Bulger. There is an underlying theory that the project never stopped and is ongoing even today. That the CIA were running drugs and profiting off it while the US government was expanding drug laws. Edit. They still do, by the way. There's a running conspiracy that Kubrick did not film the moon landing. This was recently proven true by Buzz Aldrin, who did go to the moon and did not meet Stanley Kubrick. That all popular AskReddits will be reposted. During Cold War there was a commercial which is showing how to dig a foxhole shelter in case of a nuclear attack, commercial made by the US government. Later it's proven by CIA documents that government didn't want to deal with dead bodies aftermath of a nuclear attack. So the purpose of the commercial was make citizens to dig their own grave. Chemicals in the water turning the freaking frogs gay. Not really, but it's been shown that certain pesticides can cause frogs' sex to change. The military-industrial complex is real and is the reason why America is in a perpetual state of war overseas. The top comments are pathetic. Apple slows down old iPhones. Armstrong cheats at bike race. How about the most powerful people in the world being serial child rapists? That most questions on this subreddit are inherently produced by bots with only a few modifications to make themselves seen as new questions. Don't get me wrong though. I still love the answers you guys give. Unethical human experimentation in the US. There is a long Wikipedia article. Keep in mind that nobody has ever been held accountable for this. Fascinating how we have more proven conspiracy theories than can be counted on both hands. Yet people are routinely shamed when new, highly plausible theories are presented. The GOP is trying to suppress voter rights in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election. Magnetic materials and money can be used to determine the number of bills a person is carrying. Epstein didn't kill himself. Wait, it's 2020? Ignore this post. The Vietnam War was just a DEFCON attempt at making it tons of money on an unwinnable war. Then Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers. Echelon. A NSA MI6 spy system that sucked up everything from phone calls to all internet traffic, and no device was free from it. Edward Snowden comes along. Echelon was very real. This will make me sound crazy, but jackalopes are somewhat real. This might need some explanation. If a rabbit gets a certain disease, it grows disease, it will grow knobby bumps on their head that look like antlers. This is essentially a jackalope. should be no secret given last year's meme-inspiring shenanigans. But Area 51 does exist. It's the Groom Lake testing facility, which was a proving grounds for U2, F-117, SR-71, various skunkworks projects, and captured Soviet planes. Russia was trying to sway the 2016 election. Sounded crazy in mid-2016. The DNC was biased against Bernie in 2016. 2016 Democratic National Committee email leak. Released emails suggest the DNC derided the Sanders campaign. Priests raping young boys. People said the fact the police tried to cover up their actions during the Hillsborough disaster was just a conspiracy. Recently proved true. JFK. The United States House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The Earth revolves around the sun. Galileo was jailed for his theory. Unfortunately, in the USA at least, there were several unconsenting experiments that have been done in our history. Some of them even done by the government. More than the experiments included a wide array of studies involving things like feeding radioactive food to mentally disabled children or conscientious objectors, inserting radium rods into the noses of schoolchildren, deliberately releasing radioactive chemicals over US and Canadian cities, measuring the health effects of radioactive fallout from nuclear bomb tests, injecting pregnant women and babies with radioactive chemicals, and irradiating the testicles of prison inmates, amongst other things. More than much information about these programs was classified and kept secret. In 1986, the United States House Committee on Energy and Commerce released a report entitled American Nuclear Guinea Pigs: 3 Decades of Radiation Experiments on US Citizens. 61. In the 1990s, Eileen Wellsom's reports on radiation testing for the Albuquerque Tribune prompted the creation of the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments by executive order of President Bill Clinton in order to monitor government tests. It published results in 1995. Wellsom later wrote a book called The Plutonium Files. I learned about this when I was in physics III learning about radioactive elements. And well, it was disturbing to learn that people being concerned the government is out to experiment on us is a valid concern given up until at least the 1970s this was actually happening. There really is a military-industrial complex. Tobacco companies manipulate the amount of nicotine in cigarettes to keep people addicted. China is controlling the World Health Organization and making them push Chinese propaganda to spread a virus around the world. Carol Baskin killed her ducking husband. In 1980, Ronald Reagan sabotaged the Iranian hostage situation in order to win the election. Memos later proved Reagan's staff were involved in this. There was this one time the US sold arms to Iran that were under embargo to fund anti-communist rebels in Latin America. There was this one time the bank HSBC trafficked money to terrorist organizations in the Middle East by modifying the names of their account holders by adding hyphens or spaces and changing capitalization, for example, Osama bin Laden instead of Osama bin Laden. When this was discovered, no one got charged with any crimes. They also did the same thing for drug cartels. Reddit is a propaganda site disguised as a discussion forum. The FBI provided funding for right-wing domestic terrorists in the United States. See Secret Army Organization. Edit. Typo. I don't know about that. The oddest thing I have ever seen in my life was before FIFA World Cup 2018 there was a short clip on YouTube that said France will be the champion, and he said because they lost 2006 it is a payback for them. Even for 2022 Qatar World Cup instead it gonna be Brazil. I am waiting for it. Chasing cars by Snow Patrol. Heck of a bop. That Superman was actually Clark Kent.